Jesus showed himself again to the disciples. It was by the Sea of Tiberias, and it happened like this. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 more of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." They replied, "We'll come too." They went out and got into the boat, but caught nothing that night. It was light by now, and there stood Jesus on the shore, though the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. Jesus called out, "Have you caught anything, friends?" And when they answered no, he said, "Throw the net out to starboard, and you'll find something." So they dropped the net, and there were so many fish that they could not haul it in. The disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." At these words, "It is the Lord," Simon Peter, who had practically nothing on, wrapped his cloak round him and jumped into the water. The other disciples came on in the boat, towing the net and the fish. They were only about 100 yards from land. As soon as they came ashore, they saw that there was some bread there and a charcoal fire with fish cooking on it. Jesus said, "Bring some of the fish that you've just caught." Simon Peter went aboard and dragged the net to shore, full of big fish, 153 of them. And in spite of there being so many, the net was not broken. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples was bold enough to ask, "Who are you?" They knew quite well it was the Lord. Jesus then stepped forward, took the bread, and gave it to them, and the same with the fish. This was the 3rd time that Jesus showed himself to his disciples after rising from the dead. If we ignore the elephant in the room, the elephant being that no one seems to recognize Jesus after he's risen from the grave, the rest of the scene seems fairly ordinary, doesn't it? Jesus sharing a simple meal of bread and fish with a few of his disciples. Something we know he did, albeit with a few more people than just a handful. But it must have been something that would have happened sitting under the olive trees, sharing bread and cheese, or on a beach, on a shore somewhere, cooking some fish that Peter or the others had just caught. It must have been fairly ordinary, I suppose. For 10 years or so, every summer, I'd help take a group of kids, boys from a school I used to teach in, to the Channel Islands, to Guernsey. We'd take about 80 of them, but there would be 2 groups. There'd be one group of 40 for 10 days or a fortnight, and when they left, the second group would come out. So we never had more than 40. They would do all sorts of things in the morning, but every afternoon we'd try and take them to a beach. And we'd choose the beach depending on the weather and the tide and the wind, so that we could get the most out of the afternoon. After a few days, some of the kids were looking for something a bit more, and occasionally I would take a handful on a little adventure. Sometimes, depending where we were on the island, I'd take them across the causeway to Lihu Island and let them swim in the Venus pool. We'd take them to the butterfly farm, or to forests, or cliff walks. Once I even took them to see an elephant, dancing or not. They didn't believe there was an elephant on the island, but there was. One of my favourite little expeditions was one I came across later on. On a particular beach that we'd go to, I can't remember the name, there was a little cave. It didn't seem to be anything particularly exciting. But at low tide, and if you knew what you were doing, you could pick your way through the darkness and over the boulders and through the little puddles that remained, and you'd emerge on the other side of a cliff, on an empty beach, a little cove that you could only get to by boat if you didn't know about the cave, and the tide wasn't out. So occasionally I would take a few of the boys there and let them have a quieter time. Most of the beaches we went to, we took deck chairs and floats, footballs, frisbees, buckets, spades, all sorts of things. The kids would take over the beach, then play beach cricket, which takes a lot of space. Most of the people on the beach were quite happy because they'd have kids who'd come and join ours and join all the fun and make use of all the equipment that we'd take down. But it'd be chaos, it would be noisy, it'd be mayhem. And occasionally it was just nice to have a little quiet time. Some of the older kids particularly enjoyed a little spell on a beach by themselves. So we'd go occasionally and we'd do that. But there was one time we went and we picked our way through the cave and we emerged into the bright sunlight to discover that our deserted beach wasn't deserted. There was a couple. At the time I thought they were an elderly couple, but now they were probably barely middle age. At least I would think so now. And they were sitting on deck chairs. They'd arrived by boat and they had a little barbecue and they were cooking fish that they'd caught earlier in the day and sitting drinking chilled white wine from a cool box. Well, they were drinking it from glasses, but the wine was in the cool box. You know what I mean. And they were as surprised to see us as we were to see them. But they invited us over. I went over and apologised for disturbing their peace, but they were delighted to see us. They invited us to join them and they offered to share their wine, and I very quickly declined just before any of the boys decided they might like to try it. I'm sure they'd tried wine before. But they offered to share their fish as well. More than we need, they said. And before I had a chance to politely decline that, one of the boys took the plate that was being proffered and tucked into some fish. And it was lovely. We ate their bread. They produced some chilled water from their cool box. And we must have spent about an hour sitting on that beach with a couple that we'd never met before. And they were fascinating people. And they seemed genuinely interested in us and the boys and what we were doing there and why we went. And it was a lovely afternoon. The time flew by. It was only when the tide began to turn and waves began to break on the beach that we decided that we'd have to leave. We'd have to go back before the water reached the cave and flooded it, and our means of escape from that little cove was lost to us. I really enjoyed it. It was lovely. Didn't realise it at the time, but that was a real moment of grace. I wouldn't have used that language then either. I wouldn't have known. But there was something special about that afternoon and the time we spent with that couple. I had the boys talking about it with the others later on in the evening, talking of the secret beach that they'd discovered as if it had been lost, and the couple that fed them, and the feast got grander and bigger, and according to them, wine wasn't declined. But later on again, in the evening, when I was sitting with the rest of the staff, and we were sitting chatting about the day, I was telling them about it, and even then, it still felt good. It felt there was something special about it. And it was a moment of grace. I'm still not sure what I mean by that. But you know, I wonder if it comes close to the experience of Peter and the others breaking bread with Jesus on the shore after they'd been fishing. I've got no idea whether it did or not. But there was something of God in that moment. And there was something of God in the moment that the boys and I shared with that couple on the beach. I suppose if I tried to put it into words, I wouldn't do it justice. But something about it was about coming to life about being a little more alive. And just remembering that, just thinking of that, it brings back something of that life. Is that what encountering the risen Christ is about? Becoming more alive? Living a little more fully? Maybe it is. Maybe there are moments when we really encounter something of God in our world. Something of the life that Christ came into the world to share with us. Maybe they're the moments that we should treasure and dust off every once in a while when we feel the need to live a little more fully. I started making these videos a couple of years ago. When the church first went into lockdown, people weren't able to come to church. And rather than streaming a mass with no congregation, as many others were doing, I decided that I'd try and do something different. And these little video reflections were what I went for. But that was a couple of years ago, and things have almost got back to normal. People are able to come back to church. And I'm just wondering if these videos still serve a purpose. If they do, then I'm happy to continue making them. I enjoy making them. But if nobody's really looking for them anymore, maybe there are other things I could more usefully use the time for. So what I'm asking is, if you do enjoy these videos and you would like to see more of them, let me know somehow. Either post a comment or like or subscribe or something, just to let me know that there is someone out there who would like me to continue. If not, then keep an eye open for something different in its place. Thank you for taking time to listen to this, and please consider letting me know somehow, some kind of feedback, whether you want more of the same. Thank you.